All right, first preacher's getting ready to come. On the way here this morning, my wife was talking to me about who was being preached about, and she pronounced the name one way, and I pronounced the name the other way, so we're waiting on the authority to settle this dispute. You want me to tell you how I did it so that you take my side?
No, I'm going to ask James because I know it'll be opposite. All right. There's a lot of things I'm not the master of, and the English language is one of them. I don't understand it. Why they put letters in there that you don't say? How stupid is that, you know? I mean, who's got Stephen? Do we do Stephen yet? Does someone have, Stephen? In the Bible, I would think it would be S-T-E-V-I-N, Steve-in. But it's not. It's S-T-E-P-H. Is it E-N or A-N? E-N, Stephen. Well, why is S-T-P-H-A-N Stephan? Why isn't it this Steve-An? I don't understand it. Anyways, I got Stephanas. I'm going to call him Steve for the sake of this. Right? 1 Corinthians 16. We're going to realize when we get to heaven, even Scorby was wrong. I've never been there, but I've been around some people. Like in Islam, we were housing international students and stuff, and brethren, they don't pronounce these names nothing like we do, even Scorby. All right, 1 Corinthians 16, 10:23, verse 15. I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanas, that it is the firstfruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. Now, if you've been saved for 20 years, you probably heard 10 messages on addiction in this guy. Well, you're going to walk out of here today saying you've heard 11, all right? To the ministry of the saints, that ye submit yourselves unto such, and to every one that helpeth with us and laboreth. I am glad for the coming of Stephanas and Fortunatus and Achaicus, for that which was lacking on your part they have supplied. For they have refreshed my spirit and yours. Therefore acknowledge ye them that are such. Father, I pray you bless your word, your people, and Lord, just that Jesus would be ministered to today. That's our goal here, and we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Now here it says there that they've addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. The context of addiction is good. When's the last time in our day you heard addiction in a good context? Almost 21 million Americans have at least one addiction. Alcohol and drug addiction cost the U.S. government $600 billion every year. 20% of Americans who have depression or anxiety disorder, now you got to get this new term if you're going to be up with the smart people, also have a substance use disorder. It's called SUD. For you that went to public school, that means addiction. Okay? Substance use disorder. Now, I don't know what gives them the right to judge people to say you have a disorder. That's not very nice. But anyways, that's what they say. That's called addiction. More than 90% of people who have an addiction started to drink alcohol or use drugs before they were 18 years old. Americans between the age of 18 and 25 are most likely to use addictive drugs. It seems like addiction is epidemic. Our county sheriff there, they had their call for all the faith leaders, and they're crying for help. And that sheriff said they're finding them dead with the needle still hanging out of their arms. They're not addicted to alcohol, they're addicted to drugs. If it's not drugs, it's porn. If it's not porn, it's Big Macs. And it's taken its toll, and it's impacting our churches, whether we like it or not. With 25 million people addicted, if you don't see much of it, you probably don't get out much. Now, I'm not a scientist, but the smart people say what causes addiction is these chemicals in your brain. One of them is called dopamine. Why do you think they call it dope? Dopamine. It's a chemical in your brain, and the way it works is that when you do something that feels good, or see something that looks good, or eat something that tastes good, or listen to something that sounds good, it sort of squirts this stuff in your brain. And to one extreme or another, you kind of get these warm fuzzies. And something in your brain says, I want to do that again. I want to see that again. I want that feeling again. I want to taste that again. And if you repeat it enough and enough and enough, it literally rewires your brain. So that physiologically, you have to have it. That's why you can't pass by those golden arches. My steering wheel just going, you just got to go talk to that girl in the booth and get you a 55-gallon drum of Coke and a cheeseburger. Addiction is a powerful thing. I've seen it up close and personal. One of my best friends in high school, his name was Tony, number 22, running back, had a great future. Went to the University of Rochester, played football on a scholarship. In the 80s, he went for chiropractic. He was making $200,000 a year in the 80s. You know where he found cocaine? Not in the hood, on the golf course. I had lost touch with him for years, but he did get saved. And he called me one day from jail, and he said, Joe, I don't want to get out. This is the only place I can't get it. I don't know what's going to happen if I get out. 6 months later, he was dead. My friend Joe Lonsky, he just died last week of cancer. I led him to Christ 25 years ago. Great man of God, great soldier of the cross, died at 60 years old. Cancer got him, and then he got that COVID. But he was on that rock, crack cocaine, man. He is one of the few that I've ever seen, lost or saved, that I've ever seen break the addiction of crack cocaine. He's making $40,000 a year in a carpet business in the 80s. Good-looking guy, not hard to get a date. And we talk about it, and we sit down. I'm trying to work him through these things over the years, and he said this, and I hope this is okay to say. He said, Joe, if you, in the pit of my addiction, if you gave me access to the most beautiful woman on the planet and a piece of that rock, I'd take a piece of that rock every time. How can that be? He was addicted. My mom died the year after I got saved, got married. My dad was a widower, lived alone. He said, the strangest thing happened to me last night. He said, it's winter, cold, dark. He goes, I got a knock on the door. I was a little concerned, went out there, and it was one of my old buddies, Mike, another guy I played football with. Mr. Cammilleri, it's Mike. Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing? Listen, I was down at the grocery store, forgot my wallet. You got $20 I can borrow? I'll put it in the mailbox. Sure, Mike, no problem. I go, Dad, you didn't give it to him, did you? He said, yeah, why? I said, Mike's addicted. Mike stole his own mother's television. How does somebody steal their own mother's television? They're addicted. They're addicted. You were at the meeting, and you were at the meeting in 2004, I believe, in California, in Marysville. We had a street preachers convention, and we were up preaching in San Francisco, and my son was handing tracts down with one of his buddies on the other end. He called me on the cell phone and said, Dad, this guy wants to talk to you, street guy. Okay. So I went and met this guy, and I'm thinking, he either wants money or a meal, and I said, what do you want? And he said, Jamaican guy, and he said, I said, what do you want, money, a meal? He said, I want help. What kind of help? He goes, listen, I'm saved. I was raised in a Christian home. He goes, I'm addicted to crack. I've been out here in these streets, and I want out. I said, what kind of price are you willing to pay? He says, I'll pay anything. I said, get on the bus. And we were 2 hours away in San Francisco from Marysville, and we put him on that bus. I think we swung into Walmart, bought it. He was a mess, stunk, man. Put some clothes on him. There was a man at the meeting who had a men's home in Carolina, and we sent him to that men's home. And I kept communication with him, and he went through the men's home program and then moved in my house. 8 daughters, 1 son, and a Jamaican crack addict from San Francisco. Now, he had his section, and we had ours. And boy, he high character. If he saw a piece of paper on the ground, he'd pick it up. And he would just got into the Bible Institute. I got him out of all kinds of trouble because he skipped a parole out there in San Francisco, and we worked that all out. I went on a missions trip to Romania. I was gone one day. We had to get him a car. Somebody let him borrow a car from church. He'd done good for a year. And he was going to work, and my wife called me the first night I was in Romania and said, Roy's gone. I said, change the locks, because I told him, zero tolerance, Roy. I'm not messing around. What happened to Roy? One night, he was addicted. I've seen it take its toll. I've seen it destroy people's lives. And the cry today is, we must eradicate addiction. I say not so fast. You know what I think we need to do? We need to replace addiction. God's people could use some addiction. Paul said, the way you serve sin, serve righteousness with that same radical addiction. Stephanas proves it's not addiction that's bad, it's what you're addicted to. Forgive me, but I submit that God designed dopamine and serotonin and endorphins and all that fuzzy brain stuff. And if you use it under His design, it's really nice. I think it's given for our good pleasure. Man, that gator was good the other night. My things was going, psh, psh. I never had this before. Psh, psh. Sometimes I just wish I had a hole in the back of my head so the stuff could just go in and go out and not go everywhere else. Listen, this will blow your mind. Listen to this modern definition of addiction. Addiction is a term that means compulsive physiological need for or use of a habit-forming substance like heroin or nicotine, characterized by tolerance and well-defined physiological symptoms upon withdrawal. Your body literally reacts when you stop. In plainer words, it's not good. Webster's 1828, addiction, the act of devoting, the state of being devoted. Stop. For the sinner, addiction is bad. For the saint, addiction is good. For the sinner, addiction is wrong before God. For the saint, addiction is welcomed by God. The world says eradicate addiction. God says replace addiction. So addiction's so welcome by God that He names this no-name man and said, you know what? This guy was addicted with his house to something good. We need more addicts. That's what we need. In studying this message, I had flashbacks because this guy reminded me of me. And I don't know how much of it when I got saved was the Spirit of God, and I don't know how much God was using dopamine and serotonin and how all that stuff works together. But when I got saved and I took one hit of this, something in me said, I like that. Something warm, fuzzy in me said, I want to read that. I never read a book in my life. I took a science fiction class in English in high school only because I had to, and I was supposed to read War of the Worlds, and the night before the test I went to the movie. I'm a little ashamed to say my addiction after 4 decades. It's one thing when you want it. It's another thing when you have to do it. My addiction has waned somewhat. Working a secular job with, I think we had 4 kids at that time, rising 2.5 hours early. You know why? Because it says about that drunk over in Proverbs, when I awake, I will seek it yet again. I can't wait to get, look at this, and look at that. And break time, go again. And lunchtime, go again. And break time, go again. What happened to me? I was addicted. I remember reading the book of Revelation for the first time, and I went to Brother Jay, the guy that led me to Christ. I said, what about this book of Revelation? Now, don't stone me. I didn't know James Knox yet, and he didn't have a commentary on Revelation. So Brother Jay gave me Dr. Ruckman's commentary on Revelation. I'd never read a book in my life. I read it in a weekend. My wife, what are you doing reading? You're not a reader. You can't believe this. Now I look back and say, yeah, a lot of it I couldn't. Oh, sorry. I was addicted to church. Man, I got in there and I heard this preaching. First of all, I walked in, they had the lights on. I was Catholic. The priest that stutters. You know. I heard the preaching. I said, I want to hear this again. And what was funny in them days, we had a tape ministry, you know, and you could get a tape of the sermon. Well, I got to get that again. Well, I'm starting to stack up all these tapes, but I'm still wanting the new ones. After a while, I said, forget the old one. Just keep getting the new stuff. I was addicted. And you know what else happened? It wasn't enough just to hear it, because the addict is never satisfied. And I don't know if it's termed a bear. Bear told me this. He's another one that survived and got out of that stuff when Jerry found him in a mission home, you know, chasing the dragon or whatever. But there's no high like that first high, so they got to have more and more and more. And you know what, again, I don't know how much is the Spirit, I don't know how much is, but whether it's heroin or whether it's preaching, I didn't just want to hear preaching, I wanted to do preaching. Are you addicted? I don't know how the thing all works together. When you get it all figured out, let me know. But I'll tell you what, we need some addicts. Don't eradicate addiction, replace addiction. Romans, don't turn there, chapter 1, Paul said, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated, watch, unto the gospel. I told you about my friend Joe Lonsky. I led him to Christ 25 years ago. He didn't come to church. His wife was Catholic, and she kind of didn't want to break the family and did that, so they were going to the Catholic church, and Joe would go for a while. He'd go for about 7 months, and I'd get a call. Joe's gone. $40,000 a year carpet business, gone. He would get a job in a high school, and let's say a $5,000 job, and they'd give him the money for the carpet, and he'd go smoke it up his nose, man. Gone. Joe's gone. And I could take you to the place I was, where I was talking to him on that little flip phone 20-some years ago. He said, they told me I got an addictive personality. I said, you need to get into church with a bunch of other people with addictive personalities. I said, listen, here's what you're doing, Joe. You're there. You can't have a credit card, you can't have cash, you can't have car keys, you can't go on a job without one of your kids, and you're just sitting there counting how many days you've been clean. I said, if that was my life, I'd go out and get high too. I said, you need to be separated onto something. If you've got addictive behavior, get addicted to something that God has ordained. And man, he got in and he got all in. I've never seen a man, when I'm looking out at that congregation, brother, I'm not worried about him sitting there like this. He's weeping, he's raising his hands, loving Jesus. I'll just tell you this quick testimony. We had our auction. He was a garage sailor. He'd go to these garage sales. He found a Psalm of David, little book like this, from 1851. And we auctioned it off, and we had a couple high rollers there, and they paid $400 for this little book. And this man, this rich man, took this book and he went and he gave it to Joe's son. After that auction, that little Psalm of David. I tell you what, I said, Joe, listen, you're saved, you're separated, but you got to get separated unto something. Listen, if you got a bad addiction on something that's not of God, you need to separate from it. You need to get it. You need to pay any price. Get rid of the computer. We didn't have them up to 20 years ago. Wouldn't you rather not have a computer than just hate yourself and be miserable? That stinking devil. And I don't care if it's a Big Mac, but that's why I'm not real hard on it, because I like the table. You can probably tell. I went on a diet and lost 2 weeks. But get it out. Try to get it out. Get away from it. But the best cure for addiction is an overriding addiction. How to recognize. Listen, we got too much lukewarmness. You know what we need to be? We need to be as radical as the world. How to recognize an addiction. Number one, Stephen's addiction caused him to stand out. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1. I like this. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. I never noticed this unless I was assigned. And, you know, you get assigned these things and, you know, why did I get this one? And how come he got that one? But you get it and then you're so thrilled. It's like the dopamine squirting when you get something from God. Amen? Look at Paul. Verse 14. I thank God that I baptized none of you but Crispus and Gaius, lest any should say that I had baptized my own. And I baptized also the house of Stephanas, but besides, I know not whether I baptized any. He said, you guys are arguing about who baptized who. He said, when I was there, it was such a whirlwind, I don't even remember who I baptized. Except I do remember this one guy. I remember this guy, Stephanas. He was the guy, didn't he have like 14 kids? And this guy, they're handing out the baptismal robes and said, we better go to Walmart and get some more robes, man. This guy just kind of stood out. An addict stands out. An addict is different. An addict could care less, is not concerned what people think about them. He's not concerned with satisfying people. He's concerned with satisfying his addiction. I beseech you, as pilgrims, they stand out, and strangers, they stand out in the earth, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. Why are we afraid to stand out? Give us a scripture shirt? Are you kidding? Listen, I wear scripture shirts because I'm afraid to witness. Now you say that don't make much sense. They got no choice then. I got it on me. They see it. Maybe I don't have to say nothing. You know. Okay, bye. I'll tell you who doesn't care what people think. It's the addict. We found Roy. He had what they call crack feet. I can't explain what his feet looked like. Did not care. Now I raised 8 girls. So I know a little bit about girls, and we have a conviction about men dressing like men, women dressing like women. Don't worry, I'm not going to go any further than that. But here's what I found: if a lot of times girls, if they got a conviction, say about dressing like a woman, a skirt, if they're going to the mall, they'll get that skirt that's just as closest to the world as they can be. Why? Because as much as women are just designed to stand out and all that, they don't want to be too different. I'm telling you, we need some addicts that would not be afraid to display modesty and cover the flesh and just proclaim the glory of God. Addicted. His addiction caused him to stand out. Oh yeah, I remember that guy. Steve's addiction impacted his family. 1 Corinthians 16:15. I beseech you, brethren, you know the house of Stephanas, first fruits of a kind. His whole house was baptized. Listen, I know that our kids need to eventually make their own choice. We are not Calvinists. God said, I've nourished and raised up children, and they have rebelled against me. But I heard couple preachers say this, and I'll use it. My kids were on drugs. I drug them to church. I drug them to the prayer meeting. I drug them to outside meetings like this. But most of all, I drugged them to the ministry. You know, it would have been so much easier in New York City in the middle of the summer without 8 kids and a pregnant wife and a stroller and diaper bags. It would have been so much easier at Beale Street. without my teens and preteens. It would have been so much easier in San Francisco. But you know what? That's where my kids met the Walkers. That's where my kids met Brent Logan, Joel Logan, James Knox. That's where my kids met Jack Patterson. And you know what? The ones that are addicted, I attribute it a lot because I was addicted to the ministry. Children of addicts are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction. So the best chance you want your kids to get addicted, you get addicted. Steve's addiction caused him to stand out. Steve's addiction impacted his family. Steve's addiction gave him a disregard for possessions. Now look at this verse 17 that I never would have seen if I wasn't assigned. I'm glad for the coming of Stephanas and Fortunatus and Achaicus. For that which was lacking on your part, they have supplied. I don't know what's behind that. I don't know if they were taking up an offering. Paul needed some maybe legal funds or something like that. And maybe they took a stingy offering and these guys were counting the money and said, what's he going to do with this? And so I'm wondering if Stephanas did say, oh, I'll make it up. Well, how much did we need? Come on, let's kick in, guys. Fortunatus, he had to have some money, named like Fortune, you know. Joe Lonsky would blow $1,500 in a weekend in 1990. Money was no regard. Look what he says there. He said, verse 18, for they have refreshed my spirit. Isn't it a blessing? Isn't it refreshing to be around a church that's generous and around people that are generous and around believers that are generous? Listen, don't be stingy. Take chances like addicts do. Steve's addiction caused him to stand out, impacted his family, gave him a disregard for possessions. Verse 15. I beseech you, brethren, you know how the house of Stephanas, that is the first fruits, how that they have addicted themselves. No one's going to addict you. They can help. You can get the right environment. I can remember where I was and who I was with when I took my first drink, my first drug A, my first drug B, my first drug C. But in every case, and they were all more experienced than me when I got introduced to it. But they can't say, well, you're Cousin John, you know, if it wasn't for... No, I made the choice. Just like when I got saved, I made the choice. We're going to be at church. We're going to be there. I remember the first time my wife was a school teacher with a master's degree in special education, which is what God knew she would need to marry me. I'm reading the Bible and I said, we're going to start giving to church. Okay. This is 1986. I'm making 45 at Kodak. She's making 35 teaching. $20 a week. She goes, $20, cheap Italian, you know. She goes, $20 a week. I'm not going to be working forever, you know. And that first week we put the $20, we had a bunch of little kids and these people at the nursery at the church, they came and give us all these baby clothes. Then I read the thing about in Malachi where if you don't tithe, he's going to take everything you got and scold you. I'm not sure that's for us. I ain't taking no chances, whatever. You know what the opposite of him rebuking the devourer for your sake is? Him not. We're going to tithe. And it's been 36 years, man. God never let us down. Now watch verse 16. Watch verse 16. What he says about these guys, he's talking to the Corinthians, that ye should submit yourselves unto such and to everyone that helpeth with us and laboreth. He said, you know what? Get around this guy that's addicted. Learn something from this guy that's addicted. Get under this guy that's addicted. Submit to yourself. You know what? Addicts like being around other addicts. Young people, get around addicts. You say, well, I might have to leave my friends. You get around addicts, your friends will leave you. You know what I like as a preacher? This preacher told me they got like 30 people from like a bear trail. I'm like, and I got to go preach there in January, and I'm like, I'm scared. I go down to Brother James' church, it's like they're all addicted. This is like being in a drug house. Listen, I don't know if any of you go to Mike Pearl's church. I think he's got I'm not endorsing anything. All I'm saying, that book that he wrote on jumping ship, that, man, your kids are looking over the edge and they're seeing what's going on in this world, and they're looking at the drugs of this world, and they're looking at the dance in this world, and they're looking at the nakedness of this world, and they're thinking, man, I think I'm going to jump the ship. But you know what? I sure do like this ship here. I'm sure having a good time here. I had an old man, Brother Ellison, came in one time, and I said, why don't you preach on the home? He preached 3 nights in a row. Number 1, first night, make good memories. Second message, make good memories. Third message, make good memories. You know how you make good memories? Get addicted. Get addicted. And maybe, just maybe, the Spirit of God, I don't know how it all works, will work in conjunction with all that dopamine and endorphins, and you say, I want to read that again. I want to hear that again. You know what, Daddy? That meeting over in Knoxville, I like that. Can we go do that again? We used to call it getting high. God give us addicts. What better compliment could there be than God saying, this guy was addicted to the ministry of the saints?